To begin today's discussion, I'd like to make a couple of general comments. First, there's way too much information to try and memorize. It's more important to know where to find the information in publications, training documents, and your fellow tax counselors. Don't be afraid to ask questions and take advantage of the knowledge your fellow tax counselors have gained through experience. You'll be able to use every resource while preparing for and taking the certification tests, and in any activities while supporting the taxpayers we support during tax season. It isn't expected that you'll totally remember everything you hear today. We're now going to shift from a more general discussion to focus on specific types of taxable income and how to capture this income in the TaxSlayer software application. These income types are presented along with exercises in the NTTC self-study document we're using this fall. Now, the first type of taxable income we'll discuss is wages, which are reported in the W-2 tax form. So you can find information on income in Publication 4012 Tab D and Lesson 8 in Publication 4491. That's the training guide. Now, as part of this lesson, we'll provide a demonstration on how to access Practice Lab and enter a Form W-2. So income. When a taxpayer presents any income documents, a W-2 for wages, 1099 retirement, a 1099 INT for interest, a 1099 DIV for dividends, or an SSA 1099, their Social Security statement, or any other documents with income, we must input any and all information from the income documents into the TaxSlayer software to create an exact copy of the document. So if you see it, key it in. Here's an example of a W-2. Notice the boxes. Box 1, wages, tips, and other compensation. Box 2, federal income tax withheld. Box 3, Social Security wages, and so forth. All we'll need to do is place the information from the W-2 form into the matching box in TaxSlayer. So box 1 of the form goes into box 1 in TaxSlayer, box 2 goes into box 2, and so on. On this W-2, each of the boxes that will need to be entered into TaxSlayer have been highlighted with the yellow box next to or inside the corresponding tax form box. As a reminder not to miss anything, the TaxSlayer input form will not look exactly like this, but all of the boxes on this form will be on the TaxSlayer input form. Again, just make sure to match up the boxes in the W-2 with the corresponding boxes in TaxSlayer. So what are the codes in box 12? The codes in 12 provide more information and determine if the amount is income for income tax reporting. As an example, notice that the amounts in boxes 3 and 5, Social Security and Medicare wages, don't match the wage amount in box 1. Differences between these amounts are generally explained by the information in box 12, which is A, B, C, or D. It could be multiple codes. In this case, the difference between boxes 3 and 5 and box 1 is $1,000, which matches the $1,000 in box 12A. Notice the code. It's a D. Code D represents a contribution to retirement plan, which means the amount in box 12A, $1,000, is not included in taxable wages, but still subject to Social Security and Medicare taxes. And that's why the amount in box 1 is $1,000 less than the amounts in boxes 3 and 5. Code DD in box 12 tells us that the taxpayer has employer health insurance. That's for information only. Although noted in the tax return, it's not used for tax calculations. By the way, if you need to enter more than 4 codes, input another W-2 for the same employer with income of $1 in the wages, tips, and other compensation field, and add the additional codes. Make sure to subtract $1 from the wages, tips, and compensation field in the original W-2 if you have to do that. A check in box 13 retirement plan confirms the employees participating in an employer's retirement plan, as an example of 401k. Make sure not to miss the checks in box 13. If these are not checked and should have been, it can cause some calculations in the return to be incorrect. Box 14 may also contain codes. As opposed to the codes in Box 12, there are no standard list of codes for Box 14, although you'll see a drop-down box with some pretty common Box 14 codes in TaxSlayer. Most of these codes are used by employers and states who can list any description they choose. There's one code, however, that you'll see quite a bit. That's the MAP-FML, which is the Massachusetts Paid Family and Medical Leave. You may sometimes see two codes in the Box 14 for MAP-FML, which may appear slightly different. If so, add the two values together when entering the data in TaxSlayer. Be careful not to overlook this code, as the font is sometimes very small. We had to use a magnifying glass last year in order to determine what the number was on several of the returns. And if you don't find the value you're looking for in the list for a code, just use Other from the drop-down. We'll see that in just a bit in TaxSlayer. Make sure that state withholding is from Massachusetts. If you have someone who moved to our state, the taxpayer may have withholding from another state. Please remember that you can't prepare out-of-state tax returns if you haven't been trained and certified on them. Find out from your local coordinator how to handle this. And be aware that taxpayers will sometimes bring in prior year W-2s by mistake. So be careful. Make sure to verify the proper tax. Here's a list of the Box 12 codes. When you have a little time, open up 4012, and you'll be able to find these codes and their meaning in tab D, along with other information related to Form W-2. If you're generating a tax return in the future and you don't recognize the Box 12 code, you'll need to look it up to understand how it may impact the return. One other place to find the Box 12 codes is in the back of the W-2 form. I wish you good luck in trying to read them off the W-2 because they usually are in very tiny print. Please note the codes mentioned below the list, including code D that we just saw in the W-2 example. These codes could impact a tax return, as the taxpayer may be eligible for the retirement savings contribution credit if retirement plan is checked in Box 13. Credits will be discussed in another presentation. Now, unlike Box 12 on a Form W-2, the codes in Box 14 are not standard. They generally are created by individual government organizations or businesses. Now, on the left are some of the more common meanings for codes used in Box 14. On the right are actual codes that one organization uses. It turns out that the organization is UMass Lowell. Again, there's no standard list of codes for Box 14 and W-2. Do, however, watch out for Box 14 code abbreviations like PEN or RET. They could stand for pension or retirement. Now, these indicate contributions to a pension or retirement plan. We'll learn about the potential impact on a tax return later, but just be aware that these codes may require additional analysis when preparing a return. What's out of scope? One of the most important things we do is check for scope. Try always to check for scope for the entire return before you enter anything into TaxSlayer. We don't want the taxpayer sitting there for half an hour, and ourselves as well, and then discovering that something on a document at the bottom of a pile of documents is out of scope. Early in my first year as a client facilitator, I spent a lot of time helping a taxpayer organize their tax records. Just prior to passing the taxpayer on to the tax counselor, she mentioned that she was renting the second floor of her home and had been doing so for the entire year. As the rental was more than 14 days during the year, her return was out of scope, and we recommended she visit a professional tax preparer, which is what you should normally do when a return is out of scope for Tax-Aide. Always check, though, with your local coordinator before taking any action. Generally, W-2s will be in scope, but there are some exceptions. Within the Tax-Aide scope manual, you can find them, and a section, I should say. It's F for form and then W-2. This is shown on this slide. Make sure to check the boxes for scope. In this slide, a code R is an Archer medical savings account. Code T is for adoption benefits. Q It's non-taxable combat pay. It's out of scope, combat and military, unless the tax counselor, a tax counselor, and a quality reviewer are certified for military returns. Okay, this is the end of this presentation on wages and W-2 income. There will be, again, a demonstration available that will be uploaded to YouTube and will be available, and that will be how to enter a W-2 into TaxSlayer.